Joining today. A big thank you to Alon and Collaborate Dental for hosting this session today as well. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Sarika Shah, and I wanted maybe just to start off by sharing a little bit of my journey through dentistry and how I became a practice principal. And I do think it's a bit of an interesting one as well. So I knew quite earlier on that I didn't want to work in the National Health Service in the NHS because of the type of dentistry that I wanted to provide and the experience that I wanted my patients to have. So I came from quite an entrepreneurial family, and I also knew that someday I wanted to have my own business. And so I had this vision of the pathway of my career quite earlier on. Clinically, I have a master's in restorative dentistry, and funnily enough, that's where Alon and I first crossed paths as well. And most of you probably know that Alon is the founder of Collaborate Dental as well. And so I bought my private practice in Canary Wharf in 2017. When I first bought it, I inherited a team of 6 people. And then 9 years on, I'm proud to say that we are an award-winning, very busy private practice, and I now lead a team of 30 people. I own the practice with my husband now. He has a banking background, and he joined about 2 years after I bought the practice. I'm lucky to have him with his background, but so many people ask me, well, if he wasn't there, would you still have the practice and would you still be running it? And I think that I would have, even if he hadn't joined. The reason being is that my father, who was an entrepreneur, had his own business, he instilled this mindset in me when I was quite a young dentist. And he said to me that not everyone is good at everything, but you have to be really good at the skill that you know. And for everything else, don't be afraid to invest in outsourcing, especially in the earlier years of setting up your business, because what that will allow you to do is set a really strong foundation. And so when we set up our practice, we did. We outsourced. We had help. We had support, and I learned so much from those people, those individuals, and those companies as well. I'm also a dentist. I work clinically 3 days a week. And I'm just going to share something vulnerable with you that in all these years, I suffered with a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety, and a lot of perfectionism. And I think it manifested physically. I had a lot of infertility issues. And as I was going through my master's in restorative dentistry, transitioning into buying the practice, bought the practice and building it, I had 7 years of IVF treatment. And in all that time of around 10 to 15 years, I went on a very deep self-development journey. And I started to master something called self-leadership, almost because I had to at that time to be able to do everything I was doing. And then I decided to become a certified mindset and leadership coach in 2019. And then in 2020, during COVID, I had my son. He's now 5 years old, and he was really just the piece of the puzzle that was missing for me. And I really felt at that time, in a sense, complete because I had my son, I had the practice, I had things, like house and car and holidays. But a year went by, and I still felt there was something that was feeling a little bit unfulfilled. And so in 2023, as I was summiting Mount Kilimanjaro in Tanzania, I had this huge aha moment. And I decided that I wanted to create this bigger impact in our industry. And so I came back and I set up my brand, Flourish. And as part of that, I run a course on self-leadership, which is a 2-day course for women in dentistry. And I also do one-to-one coaching for men and women, practice owners and associates as well. And I do that coaching one-to-one. And I'm also a passionate speaker as well at various events about leadership and self-leadership and how that's so important and connected to dentistry. So if there's one thing that I have learned in my journey so far, is that the business of dentistry is a complex one. And I also think it's quite tough. but it's also evolving. And if you have the right foundations in place, it can be a really fulfilling place to be in, a really fulfilling journey. And I think running a dental practice today means understanding so much more than just dentistry. It's about people, it's about money, it's about regulations, it's about technology now. And most importantly, I think it's about understanding ourselves as leaders. And so the purpose of today is to equip all of you with an insight into the leadership blueprint that's needed to move beyond just simply surviving, to actually flourishing and thriving and turning existing systems into sustainable growth and resilience for your team and your practice. I feel as a practice owner, I've also learned that no system really works without strong leadership behind it. And systems, they keep a practice running efficiently, but it's the leadership that gives those systems meaning, that gives those systems direction and creates results. And most practice owners I know already have systems in place, yet so many of them struggle to see consistent and sustainable growth. And I really think that missing link is leadership, the mindset, the daily actions that brings these systems that you have to life and start working optimally for you. And so today, I really want to give you an insight as to how all of you as leaders can really be that catalyst and start turning the structure that you have, everything that you've put in place into success and efficiency and productivity into true resilience for your team and your practice as well. Now, I really think that the landscape of dentistry is changing so much, especially over the last 5 years. And it's not just how it's changing, it's the speed that it's changing at as well. And what this has done is started to put certain pressures on newly acquired dental practices, squat practices, and I even think existing practices as well. So let's explore a little bit around why practice owners and what practice owners and what principles are actually facing today. So I think the first is rising patient expectations. I really think that patients today are like consumers. Okay, people walking through your doors, they don't just want excellent dentistry. They also want convenience. They want digital communication. They want a great patient experience. And it can be really, really challenging to keep delivering your services at these super high standards and constantly adapt to all the changes that are happening externally to us in the practice. The second one, which I think is a big one, is staff recruitment and retention. And I think really this has become one of the biggest challenges in dentistry today. And we've been going through, I think, a recruitment crisis for a while now. And talented nurses and hygienists and dental therapists and even dental associates are so much in high demand now. And in addition, I think that the socio-economic, political factors have, really contributed to this in the last few years as well. And I know there's been a decision that's made in Parliament around nurses. So I really think also, in addition to that, that potentially burnout, a disconnection from values and passion, maybe a change in work ethic is possibly contributing to this big turnover as well. And so practices are really, really struggling to build these stable and motivated teams and loyal teams as well. And I think the third is regulatory and compliance. And that landscape has just become a lot more complex. I think principals, we're not just clinicians, we're also responsible for governance and audits and administrative checks and reports. And I just feel that this takes up so much of our time and our energy. And then finally, there's financial pressures and competition. I really think these rise in material and equipment costs, there's increased overheads like rent. And I really feel in the last few years, staff salaries and wages have gone up quite a bit. And then more than anything, I've really noticed there's a rise in growing competition, okay, both from the corporate groups and from other practices, especially squat practices as well. And so I think patients themselves are so much more price sensitive in today's climate. So I think this combination means that us as practice principals, we're just juggling more than we ever did before. Okay, we've got all the clinical work that some of us are doing, the leadership side of things, and all the kind of admin responsibility that we have as well. And, we're not just wearing that clinical hat, we're the business leader, we're the HR manager. And I promise you, on many, many days, I even think like I am the counselor in the practice as well. And I really think that without leadership skills, and having these really strong, robust systems, that the weight of all of these responsibilities can quickly become really overwhelming and stressful and sometimes even unmanageable. And I really relate to this picture on the screen because I always feel like I've got all these like plates spinning in the air and I'm trying to balance them all and I'm trying to move forward and walk forward at the same time as well, and stop them from crashing down. I'm sure many of you will relate. So what does dental practice ownership entail? I think it's going to be great for us just to summarize this today. And what I've done is I've broken it down into 5 pillars. So the first pillar is the clinical pillar. And under this, we have all our dentistry, okay, delivering high quality clinical dentistry. We also have patient safety and safeguarding. And then there's all the regulatory compliance, which has CQC, GDC, even HTML 105. And then our record keeping and I think audits and all of that comes into this pillar as well. And then again, the second pillar is people. And I think this mostly entails leadership and management. Okay. So this is really about defining your mission, setting your vision, your values, your culture, inspiring and motivating your team, building trust, building resilience, recruitment, training, and sometimes even retraining staff. Maybe they're moving into a different position or a different role. And I think a big part of this is also HR, like contracts, appraisals, well-being of the team. I think conflict resolution comes into this as well with patients and with team members. So this is all around leadership and management. And then the third pillar is the business pillar. Okay, so this is all about financial planning, cash flow, budgeting, payroll, pensions, staff benefits. It can be around the services that you provide, the treatments you provide, treatment planning, the prices that you have for all your services. Also, things like managing your loans and tax and insurance. And then on the other side, you've got all your marketing and branding and your goodwill that you're building as well, your website, your SEO, and a big thing now is also your social media presence as well. And then the fourth pillar is your operations pillar. And this is all about your appointment systems, your patient journey. It can also have like stock control in there and supplier management and relationships you have with your suppliers. Health and safety protocols, I think, falls under this pillar. Cross-infection controls, policies, protocols, things like that as well. And then I think a big one under this pillar is technology. And Alan and I were just talking about this earlier, that how that wave is just coming crashing on all of us and, the digital dentistry integration part of things as well. And then you've got data in this pillar as well. And, this is all about data protection and GDPR, but it's also about reviewing the data that you have, auditing, like what is your demographic like, the number of new patients that are coming into your practice, recall rates, phone calls. This is just to name a few things, and metrics and things like that that you are then collecting. And then the final pillar, the fifth pillar, is strategy. This is about long-term planning and sustainable growth. If you have a mixed contract, as an example, it might be about balancing your NHS contract with your private dentistry that you're providing. It can be about adapting to changes in dentistry and how you go about doing that. It's about creativity and innovation and new ideas and what you're doing with that to improve everything in your practice. And then finally can be about growth and maybe even expansion opportunities as well. And now that I've outlined the breakdown as to what's involved in running the practice, I just want to pause for a second and unpack the difference between management and leadership, because I think sometimes the two get a little bit confused. And I think it's really important that we understand the difference. So, management is all about systems, okay? It's the structure, the processes, the audits, the metrics, the efficiency, and all the things that basically help the practice run really smoothly. So I think that if the practice was a ship and we were captains of the ship, then management would be like the engine room, okay, of the ship. And then leadership, on the other hand, is all about people. It's about vision, it's about emotional intelligence, it's about communication and the ability to build rich relationships and inspire your team. And so I think what leadership does is it sets direction and it creates the environment and the culture. So I like to think if we were the captain, then leadership is like our compass. Okay. And there is one thing that I've noticed is that if you focus heavily on the systems, but you neglect the leadership, you end up with processes that look fantastic on paper, but teams that are really burnt out and disengaged, and you'll just have a really high turnover of staff. And I truly believe that people don't just follow systems, they follow leaders. And then on the flip side, if you're a strong leader, but you lack systems, what you're doing is you're creating inspiration, but there's no structure. And what that is going to lead to is complete and utter chaos and inefficiency and consistent frustration and stress and overwhelm within your team and yourself. So I think in both cases, the consequences is, they're the same, is that you're going to limit your growth or it's going to stop altogether. Success will almost feel out of reach, and inevitably your stress levels are going to rise. Okay. So let's explore maybe some of the more common pitfalls of leadership. I think the first is decision making. As practice owners, we often delay or we avoid decisions. And I think behind that is a lot of fear and a fear around making mistakes. But indecision creates uncertainty, okay? And indecision will stall progress. So, what teams crave for is clarity. And they're just waiting for a decision. And even if that decision isn't necessarily the right one, it can later evolve, it can later be changed, but it's about the action of having the practice owners make decisions so that they can move forward. The second pitfall is communication, okay? And the big thing that I hear from my coaching clients is the difficulty around difficult conversations, okay? How to have difficult conversations. And many of us shy away from difficult conversations that we need to have or that we want to have, only because we just don't know how to have them. And I really think, again, behind that is some sort of fear that you might think that, if this doesn't go well, then this staff member will leave. And we all know then how difficult it is to replace someone. So there's always some kind of fear around having difficult conversations. But when we don't have these conversations or give clear feedback, what tends to happen is that little issues just turn into bigger issues, okay? And then it becomes really, really difficult to handle. So I really think that honest and respectful communication, what that does is that it builds trust, okay? And it solves problems a little bit earlier. And then the third pitfall is time management and delegation. And I really love this one. And I think that because we wear so many hats, we're clinicians or managers, we're leaders, that without actually prioritizing and delegating and efficient time management, what we can sometimes end up doing is just firefighting all the time. constantly dealing with problems. And it might just be like, oh, I've just dealt with this problem and now I have to deal with this problem and this problem. And you've dealt with that, and then you've got another problem. And you just think it's like never ending. Okay. So you're constantly dealing with these issues instead of actually leading strategically with clarity and with confidence. And I think behind that is because principals aren't very good or efficient at delegation. Um, so it's all around the mindset that I think we have maybe as high achievers and maybe as perfectionists, especially earlier on when we've just acquired a practice or just set up a practice, we just think, well, if I do it, then it's done properly and it's done. So I might as well do it. Um, but something that I've learned on my journey is that delegation isn't a weakness. It's actually a superpower when you can start to delegate really well. And I think it's one of the core kind of pillars of leadership. And when you start mastering delegation, what you're doing is something magical happens. What starts to happen is you start to create time, and you start to create time for your growth and other projects within your practice as well. And then I think the fourth pitfall is a lack of clear vision. Now, if your team doesn't know where the practice is heading, they can't move forward with you and they can't grow with you. Okay. So a clear vision gives the team direction. It gives the team alignment. It gives them a sense of purpose. And when you start understanding what your vision is, then you will know how to communicate that to your team. And I really think that without it, people are just mindlessly doing tasks instead of contributing to that bigger long-term goal. And then the final pitfall, I think, or one of the bigger pitfalls, is the failure to develop the team. Now, leadership isn't about doing everything ourselves, okay? It's about lifting others. It's about mentoring and training and giving your team some of the skills that they can use to develop the practice. It's about creating opportunities and also, importantly, I think giving team members the autonomy to make their own decisions. Because when we start investing in our team, in the people, the practice becomes so much stronger than just us, one individual. Okay. So, why do leadership skills matter just as much as systems? And I think it's all about people. A practice is only as strong as its people. And I really believe in this, is that staff performance directly impacts the clinical outcomes and business success. And if you just take a second just to observe what modern work culture is like, I really believe that today's workforce, they value transparency, they value inclusion, and they really, really value self-empowerment. Okay. So the first reason why leadership skills matter so much is that systems can only really work if the environment and if that culture around it supports it. Okay. And leadership, what it does is it starts to create trust. And that trust starts to create richer relationships, which in turn is going to lead to increased productivity, increased efficiency, and accountability, which is basically just optimal performance. And trust is directly related to the culture and the team morale as well. I feel it's like the golden thread that holds everything together. And when this culture that you have is a really positive one, that's when the systems that you have put in place are really going to thrive. Secondly, leadership drives engagement. So your team will follow a leader. They're not going to just follow a checklist, and they're not going to just follow processes. They will start to lose interest in that. So when you have engagement, communication starts to become so much easier. And when you have trust and engagement, you start to understand that the staff know that you have their best interests at heart and that you want them to thrive and be happy as well. And then thirdly, I think leadership builds adaptability. Now, this is really huge, especially in today's changing climate. And it's something that we desperately need in situations where regulations, where staffing, patient demands are almost sometimes changing overnight. And I think this happens to everyone. We're all in the same boat. And as practice owners, I feel that at some point we all have to navigate through these difficult situations. And when you manage to show up as a strong leader, it builds even more trust with the staff and it helps with loyalty and it helps with retention. And it also, I believe, in what I've seen in my own team, helps our team stay calm and confident when you're bringing in a change. Okay. Inevitably, when you want to grow, you're going to be bringing in changes into the clinic, and it just allows your team to manage that much better. And so, from my own experience, I really think that leadership, not necessarily a new system, is what has kept my practice steady during periods of growth and through periods of change that we've all experienced in the last few years as well. So, I think the magic really happens when leadership and systems align, okay, when they come together. And I think what the systems do is they provide that clarity and that consistency. And what leadership does is it brings intention, purpose, and it brings motivation. And I really like to think, I love this picture. I'd really like to think of it as a plane with two engines. That, one engine is systems and the other is leadership. And really, without both, you can't take off. And if one engine fails during the flight, you just can't keep flying high. Okay, at some point you're going to have to come down in altitude. And in addition, I think when you have both systems and leadership, what you start to get is you start to get better communication. You start to get improved problem solving. And I think decision making becomes so much better and easier as well. Okay. So to truly thrive, we need both systems and we need leadership together. And one without the other is ultimately going to limit your growth. But when the two work in harmony, that's when the magic happens. And that's when you start to find consistency. That's when you start to feel, as a practice owner, some fulfillment and even joy on some days in running your business. So, usually, I also think that when there is a leadership issue in the practice, it's usually because the practice principal or the practice manager or both are lacking some sort of self leadership, inner leadership. And in that situation, there is often consistent stress. There will be a sense of overwhelm. There will be a lot of back and forth and procrastination and lack of decision making. I think those individuals will probably have a lot of fear and imposter thoughts, self-doubt, also a lack of making confident decisions or even a lack of having boundaries. Um, and sometimes even that fear to just voice their own opinions and have difficult conversations. But there's one thing that I've realized is that all that just ends up being so draining. And as principals, we really just can't keep pouring from an empty cup. So, what is self-leadership? I want all of you just to visualize this big, beautiful, flourishing tree. Okay? And self-leadership is like the roots of a tree. When those roots are strong, when those roots are regularly nourished, then the leadership within yourself and with other people outside of you can grow and flourish. But if those roots are weak, if those roots are neglected, then everything else above the ground is going to struggle to grow. And slowly you'll begin to disconnect from yourself and from everything else around you as well, and everyone else around you as well. So strong self-leadership skills provides us with stability and helps us really face challenges without actually losing ourselves in that process. And it's really from this foundation that your professional leadership, your outer leadership externally, and your business can start to grow and truly flourish. So we're not going to do a deep dive into self-leadership today, but I just want to give you an insight into what self-leadership is. So I like to think of self-leadership as having four main pillars. Okay. And it's these four pillars that upholds our entire leadership. And if one of these pillars is weakened, then it can completely destabilize that connection that we have with ourselves, that we have with our team, and that we have with our business. So the first pillar is, in my opinion, the most important pillar, and it's self-awareness. Okay, I'm going to ask all of you guys a question. How many of you have so many things going on as a practice owner that you sometimes find yourselves on autopilot? Put your virtual hand up if that's what you feel, that you have so many things going on sometimes that you just feel you just need to get into a routine. You're just on autopilot. And you just feel like you're not paying full attention to all the things going on around you. Yeah. And so, having self-awareness, what it is essentially is about being consciously aware of your thoughts, of your emotions, and your actions, your behaviors, and how they're showing up in your day-to-day life. And I think emotional intelligence, EQ, it plays such a big part in this self-awareness pillar. Emotional intelligence is about understanding and regulating your emotions, especially under stress and overwhelm. And then having the skills and the tools to mindfully change your thoughts and your behaviors in that moment to create a more positive outcome. Okay. So when you have a strong EQ, you don't just have awareness of your emotions, you start to also start having awareness of other people's emotions as well. And it's so powerful when you have this tool and you understand it, because then you can start to regulate your emotions and manage them as well. But you also start to do that with the people around you, and you can start building trust and empathy with your team members and your patients as well. I'm going to ask you another question. Put your virtual hands up if you feel that your team and your patients pick up on your energy in the room, even when you haven't said a word. As soon as you walk into the practice, you've not said a word, and your team and even your patients, they just pick up on your energy. I mean, it's absolutely crazy. And there's a study around this where they had a large cohort, and they had groups of three, and they put these three people in a room together for 10 minutes, and they told them that they're not allowed to talk to each other. And then afterwards, they asked all three of them who they felt had the most positive energy and the most negative energy. And it's just insane what the results were, and what people were able to pick up. Okay. So the thing I'm going to say around this is that dentistry today, it's so, so, so emotionally led. Okay. People, your team, your patients, they're not just following your skills. They're following how you make them feel. Okay. And we have to make the skills around EQ and self-awareness habitual. You have to practice them all the time. I think it's a key pillar in self-leadership, and really any positive change that you want to make, it starts with this first pillar and self-awareness. Okay, so there's one thing you take away from today, is that just start bringing a little bit of self-awareness into your day-to-day. The second pillar is self-influence. Okay, this is all about growth and with authenticity, growth and authenticity. And once you really start to understand yourself, your thoughts, your emotions, your actions, and you can control them, what you can start to do is you can start to influence yourself. Okay. So this means really leaning into your authenticity, understanding and using your natural strengths, your quirks, your uniqueness, like what makes you you. And this is how you grow in a way that's really true to you. And I think sometimes when you're showing up as an authentic leader, your team really recognizes it, and they really start to respect you and see you in a different light, but really respect you in a different way as well. And I really think that when you are being authentic as well, is that instead of trying to copy someone else, it's where you can start to actually really come into your leadership and start to then eventually build your own leadership style. Okay. I think social media can be quite a big culprit on this, where people are just potentially following other people and maybe losing their sense of authenticity. But it's so important as leaders that we really stay true to who we are and our authentic selves. And then the third pillar is self-guidance. Okay. This is all about following your purpose, your why around why you're doing everything. Okay. And I think with awareness and with authenticity, you can then start to gain direction. So self-guidance is about letting your values and your intentions, your purpose really steer and navigate your decisions. And it helps you also set really strong, powerful, meaningful goals, okay, and impactful goals, and actually follow through on them. Because so many of us, we set goals and then they're still there and we haven't taken action on them. And so it's this pillar, the self-guidance pillar, when it's, when it's really strong, that we're actually actioning and actually bringing it, fruition to some of the goals that we've set as well. So if I go back to the analogy of the tree, I really like to think that self-guidance is like the tree trunk, and it just keeps us steady and it keeps us upright and moving in the right direction and growing in the right direction. And then the fourth pillar is self-management, okay? And self-management is all about responsibility. It's all about taking ownership of your actions. And it's all about self-accountability, actually taking action and moving forward. And I think I love this pillar because this pillar is all about time. It's about energy. It's about focus. And it's about managing your time in a really effective way. Because, guys, I'm going to say one thing is that as practice principles, time and energy are the two most precious commodities that we have. Okay. So self-management is about having really clear boundaries and protecting your energy. And going back to the tree, it's like nurturing the soil and ensuring that the tree keeps getting what it needs to grow and thrive. And then overall, when we're really nurturing all four of these pillars, what we're building is we're building habits internally. We're strengthening those roots. And it's from here that we can really start to flourish in everything that we do and lead ourselves first of all, and then start leading other people with authenticity, and most importantly, in a really sustainable way. So once you have strong self leadership, what you can start to do is you can start to change the mindset and the culture of your team. And you can start to transition from a team that might be very me to a team that starts to become we. Okay. And start to move the culture in that direction. So your team is then behaving more efficiently. And most importantly, when it makes that transition, your team is starting to support you and your vision for growth, okay, which is just amazing. So when you have these strong self-leadership skills, you really start to influence the team's mindset. And I'm going to just share something that I did for my team. So I designed a framework, and this really was from my own experience working with my team. And I created it to help other practice owners build not just strong practices, but a strong team and a strong business. And every person in the team is trained around this mindset, and it sits within the pillar framework. So the first is performance, okay? And performance is about each person in the team showing up every day as the best version of themselves, okay, consistently. And that means combining their clinical skills with time management and emotional regulation, okay, being a little bit in control of their clinical skills and their own internal skills, and well-being, sorry, and their mindset. The second is inner well-being, okay? This is all about team members learning to protect their mental, emotional, and physical well-being, all three. And so they can make clear decisions and they can communicate with each other really clearly and they can get on with their tasks really calmly. Okay. And that's what creates that positive vibe, that positive energy, that positive culture in your practice that is just like gold. Okay. When you have that. Um, and then L is leadership of self, which we've just spoken about. But this is taking it a step further. When we as principals have really strong, robust self leadership skills, we can start to share and teach self leadership to your team so that they start to have a little bit more self awareness. They start to understand their values, they start to understand their strengths and what their blind spot and development areas are. And they can take constructive feedback and they can really start to lead themselves, and lean into their own authenticity. Okay. And when that happens, they start to become really passionate and really motivated, but it's driven by them. You don't have to keep motivating and inspiring and doing that all the time because that becomes really draining, but it's almost driven by them. And then L is a learner's mindset, okay? Essentially a growth mindset. Because I really think that, what we've spoken about is dentistry and leadership are constantly evolving. So every member of your team, they have to have a growth mindset or a learner's mindset, okay? It really keeps them open, it keeps them curious, it keeps them adaptable, and, it keeps them striving to just constantly learn and grow with you, okay? Grow in themselves and grow with you as well. And then A is accountability. Now, I think this is a really important one. Okay. This again is about not you taking accountability and managing yourself, but it's about every team member also taking ownership of their own tasks and their decisions and their actions and their outcomes. And so I think self accountability builds trust within the teams, okay? And it really ensures that all the systems and the processes that you have are being followed. And not just being followed, that they're being done at a high standard without you having to consistently check and micromanage. Um, and then R is for relationships, okay? So relationships really is, at the heart of leadership, I think, and that's where, people sit. And teaching your team to have strong, respectful relationships with each other is what is really, really going to transform the culture in your practice. And in turn, when that culture is a positive one and everyone is, accountable for themselves, everyone is upskilling and growing, then inevitably, the service that you give to your patients and in terms of your reputation, all of that is going to grow, and be taken to the next level. So I think once you actually step into your leadership, you start bringing, self leadership into your team, then you can start to develop your own your own leadership style. Okay. Now, something I've noticed, and again, it gets picked up on, a lot of my coaching calls all the time, is that practice owners are still using a very authoritarian style of leadership. Okay, almost like this pyramidal style, model. And and you see it a lot, especially in, squat practices and smaller practices that are more principle led. Um, but I personally feel that this is a really outdated model, or leadership style, because I think that it just makes decision making really, really slow, especially if the practice owner themselves, have a lot of fear around making decisions or they're not managing their time very well. um Communication flow can be really, really poor as well, is by the time it gets down, to that trainee nurse, it's usually a long, long time, or information just gets lost along the way. I really think that it prevents some innovation and ideas, and sometimes staff members aren't even given the option to come up with ideas and make decisions. And I hear this a lot when I'm recruiting, that someone's leaving the practice because they don't feel like they're allowed to share their opinions and they're allowed to give feedback and share their ideas with the practice, so they kind of feel stifled in that area. And I think that this kind of style of leadership, I don't think it really reflects modern work culture, okay, which we've spoken about, earlier on as well. And essentially, what I think is that modern leadership is no longer about control. Um, it's about connection, it's about growth, it's about adaptability. And so your style of leadership, I think it needs to be more human centered and growth focused and adaptive. So there isn't just one single way to lead a dental practice today. Okay. I just feel the landscape is just too complex. There's just too much going on and too much is changing. So, actually, to be a really strong, effective leader, you need to understand and have the tools of a variety of leadership styles. Okay. So, when you really step into your leadership skills powerfully, you're able to pick the leadership style or even the leadership styles that you need depending on what your team or your practice needs in that specific situation. And that comes with a lot of learning, that comes with a lot of time. You have to have a really strong self leadership foundation for these leadership styles to be effective. And you need to be practicing a bit of self reflection. You need to be taking feedback from your team for all of this to be really effective as well. But I just wanted to just share that with you today as well. Now, in my coaching, sometimes I use this flourish wedge leadership model. And I think a lot of corporates use a wedge leadership model as well. And it really shows how you can kind of widen that leadership, share that leadership across your team over time. Okay. So, like I said, you're becoming a strong self leader, your external leadership skills are strengthening. You're then sharing self leadership skills and teaching that to your team. So they're becoming strong leaders in their own right. And so essentially, what this model is that you've got that green platform at the bottom, which is all your common goals, your vision, your mission for the practice. It will have your practice values that you've set together as a team. And ideally, practice values should be set together as a team. They shouldn't just be yours. Everyone should sit down and do them at least once a year. And then that culture, that environment that you've created as well. And then on top of this green platform sits the kind of the first part of the wedge, which is trust. Okay. And I mentioned before that I really think that trust is like the golden thread that holds all the team together. And every member of the team needs to have that kind of trust. And the trust needs to happen with each other. So it's essential. Trust is essential for fostering collaboration and to create that positive work environment. And then the middle section is competence. Okay. And this really starts with, during interview stage, during recruitment. And it encompasses all the skills and all the knowledge and all the abilities of the team members, including dental hygienists and all your nurses and the admin staff. Because at the end of the day, competence is crucial for delivering high quality patient care and efficient practice operations. And then the top part of the wedge is authority. Okay. This is where you have certain members of your team, and ideally, if you can, every member of your team has some degree of autonomy to start making decisions. Okay. And then when all of this is aligned, the entire organization, the entire practice is aligned with that. With everything in that lower green platform as well. And I hope that made sense to you all as well. Okay. So three quick actionable tips, okay, for aligning your kind of leadership with your team. And I'd say the first thing is lead by example, okay? I really believe in this, is to model the behaviors that you want your team to follow, okay? And really start with self leadership. If you're showing up as someone who is very self aware, especially emotionally aware, then you're not being reactive all the time in your decision making and in terms of emotionally as well, then your team will start to follow how you behave. Um, Start with the why. Okay, if you're a new principal, or if you feel that you're an existing principal but you just feel really lost, just go back to your why. um Share the purpose behind why you have the practice and and if you're bringing a change into the practice as well, why you're doing, why you're doing that, what's the purpose behind it, what's the purpose behind some of the systems and processes that you have in your team. If you're going to outsource and you're bringing a different company like Collaborate to work with your team, well, why are you doing it? And if your team understands the purpose behind a system, they're more likely to buy in, okay? Because systems aren't static, nothing is static, everything is changing all the time. And so you've got to let your team contribute to making all of this work better. And the third is feedback loops. Okay. I think it's so important that your team is open to feedback, that you are open to feedback, because systems have to evolve. You're going to collect and you're going to give this feedback to each other to learn from. And again, if you work with the consultancy team, you can give them some feedback as well so they can keep refining some of the systems and processes you have for a bit more of an optimal business performance as well. And so, some practical takeaways for today is that, you need strong leadership as well as structure, as the systems, processes to work well together. And one without the other is inevitably going to affect your growth, okay? And the sustainability of your growth as well. But work on both and strengthen both, and you're going to get consistent and sustainable growth. The second is that strong self leadership is the foundation of all leadership. I am so, so, so passionate about this subject. And I've really seen principals, associates completely transform their careers and their businesses when they've started to strengthen their self leadership. Okay. And when they have that coaching with me, because inevitably it's going to make you a strong outer leader. Okay. And help you develop your leadership style to deal with challenges and manage them better. And then the third is always lead by example. Okay. Really use that pillar framework, start spreading that leadership across your team, and inevitably, I think your business will flourish. Um, and I never ever end without some homework, some action. I mean that way. But look, if you've got a pen and you've got a paper next to you, just maybe jot something down. You might have been thinking about some things through this webinar as well. So what I want you to do is maybe identify one leadership behavior that you want to strengthen. Okay, and one system that you think you can improve in your practice this month, something that needs to improve straight away. What is that? And how are you going to do it? Okay, what is the first step that you need to take? And I think I just want you to jot that down. If you feel like you want to share it in the group as well right now, just share it in the group as well. I did forget to say at the beginning, if you have any questions, pop them in the chat. But we're going to go through them with you in a second as well. And I just want to say finally, thank you so much. Thank you, Collaborate, for having me on this webinar today and working with me. And, I think Collaborate Dental are brilliant because they just give practice owners the tools, the advice, the systems to really grow their business. So they're like the systems side of it. And then my role as a leadership coach is to help owners develop their leadership and their mindset skills and really start to lead their teams effectively with the systems that they have in place. If you want to know more about me, my social media platform is on Instagram. It's Dr. Sarika Shah. You can DM me on there as well. And please just explore my website as well, flourishasafemale.com. Not all the coaching I do is just for women. It's for men too. And there is a form on there that you can fill out if you want to have a 30 minutes free discovery call with me as well to maybe discuss any coaching as well. And thank you so much, all of you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sarika. That was a wonderful presentation. Rushed through a huge number of leadership principles and leadership issues. Many, many things that you brought up, which we've seen in so many practices. And as you said, yeah, so many of the problems in a dental practice actually reach back to leadership and self-leadership. So yeah, wonderful run through. Right, we have a question from Lara, and everyone feel free to open up your cameras and actually ask your questions, but in the interim I'll ask out for Lara. What are the most effective systems to have in place first-time squat practice owner not yet opened?
What was the question again? Sorry, repeat that
So
for me.
the question is, what are the most effective systems to have in place for a first-time squat practice owner?
I think we can both answer that, right? So so I mean, I'm going to come from the leadership side of things, okay? I think that if you've just opened a new practice, and I think also if you've just bought a practice that you want to expand, the first thing I did, I remember like in my tiny flat, I had this like massive board, and on there I basically had what was my vision, what was my goals, okay, and what kind of values did I want my team to have, what kind of culture did I want to set in that team. And then you have systems and processes. I have thousands and thousands of systems and processes. I like my practice to work really efficiently. And so, you will just have there's so many basic systems that you can have in place in terms of like let's just pick staff, for example, okay? Working hours of staff, when you want staff to turn up, for example, if you want staff to come half an hour before. So everyone in my practice comes half an hour before the first patient arrives. And the reason I have that, including all the associates, and I say lead by example, I'm there too, usually half an hour before that, is so that everyone can go through the day list. Okay. And so I want to see notes on the day list. The nurses have been through that already. The dentists are then discussing everything, all having a coffee. Everyone is getting together and integrating and communicating. And then it just means that everything for the rest of the day is going to run really, really smoothly. Okay, so that's an example of a system or a process that you can put in place. And Laura, is it Lara? Is it Lara Phillips who asked that question? That's on, yeah. Yeah. So Lara, look, there'll be so much, and I think as you evolve as a practice principal, there'll be so many systems and processes that you will bring in place. I think the one thing I'll say to you is if you think that, you know what, like that didn't work, or that's not working right, or that's not working efficiently enough, you've then got to go back and think, well, what system can I put in place for this to work a lot more efficiently? And then it's like a goal. You then have to give it like 3 months or 6 months, and then say, well, okay, in 3 months, I'm going to go back. I'm going to get feedback. I'm going to see how it's like. I'm going to check the metrics maybe around that system. And then I'm just going to see, well, is that system working or not? Okay, or does it need tweaking? So I hope that answered your question because there are so many systems,
Yeah.
processes in a practice, but I just wanted to give you an example of one and how it evolves and what foundation to start off from. Did that help, Laura? She's on mute, so I don't know.
It sounds like it. No, she
Okay,
said, great, thank you.
great.
So I'm actually going to follow up a question similar to that. I guess, from my perspective, one of the things we do is use a project management tool, particularly for practices that are going about big changes. And interestingly, what I find is that it's actually very effective for communication. But its main reason or its main benefit is actually helping all the different stakeholders, different members of staff know that everyone is, it helps you understand that journey, because in order to make change, there's so many little tasks that need to be done, and very often the big picture can get lost, and find that's actually a very helpful communication tool. I would say one of the things I just sort of learned is that, yeah, probably the most important thing is to choose your staff very, very carefully, particularly as a squat. I would say don't hire someone because there's no one else. You're better off working harder than hiring the wrong person. And so I'm going to ask you a couple of questions around that, which firstly around how did you find how would you help practice define who they are, define their vision? Very often when I ask practice what their USP is, I'm sure you find that everyone says pretty much the same thing. So, we provide really good quality care in a family environment, looking after our staff and patients like their family. And then you walk into two different practices where the principals have said that's exactly the same thing, and they feel totally different. Within 10 seconds, you can feel they're totally different types of practices, and the relationships are very different. And I want do you have a sort of tip for people to how do I ask myself what is it that's really special about who we are, and how do I communicate that to my staff?
Yeah. Look, you know what, Alan? I think it really comes down to why we bought the practice, right? And let's be honest, there are going to be some people that go in there with a very business mind. They bought it there as an asset. They want to build the asset, they want to sell it, they want to make a profit, and they want to move on. And that's usually a big reason why we are putting all the hard work and all the risk into being practice principles. Okay.
Yeah,
Second to that, there is going to be something else there that you want to maybe practice the dentistry you want to do. And but why? What's so special about you? Right? What's going to be so special about your practice? Why should someone come to Lara's practice and not come to Platinum Dental Care? Right? So what differentiates you? And I think that to have the confidence and the clarity to understand that it's in you, it's deep down, it's in you, because that's what's triggered a part of why you made the decision to buy a practice. Is that you just need to reflect, you just need to find it. Um, and a lot of the times is for me, I think in my journey, I'm very open about what I've been through, and a lot of it is, being around, being authentic. I really want to show up as an authentic leader. Um, Through that, I want to be that kind of person that someone follows, and I want my team to be authentic. I talk about it all the time. It's like, just be you, like, just express yourself. And I've recruited you for you. Do you know what I mean? Because I like you. So just turn up like that. And then the patients come in and they see us, and that energy just gets transferred, and they then feel like themselves. And we have great relationships with patients. And then patients leave reviews and they're like, that is the most authentic practice that I have ever been to. And can you see sometimes like that it just follows on from there? So I think it's just about this very personal, and I think you just got to dig in deep to find out like what is your why, like what was the intention behind you buying the practice, and a lot of it will be financial. Put that aside, but what's the other reason? Do you
yeah,
want patients to have a unique experience with you, and you have something? What is that special thing that you have that other people don't have? And I think
I
start there, and then you'll be able to create your vision.
totally agree. I think what's interesting is you can look at practices, as you were saying, from so many different systems and as businesses in lots of different ways. But ultimately, practices are relationships. There's relationships between the dentist, the staff, and the patients. And when you look at long-term, really established practices, they kind of always attract the same type of people because ultimately it's all about relationships.
Yeah.
And so it's a question of like how do you provide the best support to and that's why I love the name you work with, the relationships to flourish. I've got an interesting question. Um, as you're saying, a lot of us are not very good leaders, particularly in dentistry. I think a lot of the reason is we've never been exposed to it, and so when in the world outside of dentistry, by the time you have a business, you've been managed by professional managers, and that people know what you're doing. We're kind of thrown into it. In fact, we throw ourselves into the deep end. But how would you sort of recommend someone who actually has suddenly realized they haven't been doing a very good job of leading the team, and how do they reset that kind of those relationships to become a better leader for the
Yeah.
same team?
I think that's such a great question, because I think a lot of people know deep down there's something wrong in the practice, that things aren't going right, but they fail to acknowledge that it's a leadership problem. Okay, that's the first problem. That's the first hurdle that they
Yes.
haven't kind of stepped over, is they haven't acknowledged that it's starting with the leadership, and that's where the issue is. So I think that's the first thing, is that self-awareness, just understanding that, you know what, it could be me, right? It could be me, and it could be something to do with my leadership. And I need a bit of help around this, because the other thing is as well is that For me, leadership comes very naturally. And in a sense, I was a very shy person. I wasn't very confident. I had a lot of issues, a lot of like, judgment from others and all sorts of stuff. And it's taken me a while to kind of get over that. But I think in terms of the people side of things, I love that. And that's why I'm so passionate about dentistry is what I love. But you can learn leadership. You can learn it.
Yeah,
Okay. And if I've read so many books around, top CEOs of corporate firms and how they were very introverted, very shy, weren't really people, weren't great with people, and how they suddenly became CEOs of these companies and they learned certain leadership skills. And a lot of them, if you read their autobiographies or their books, is they started with self-leadership. So if you can start mastering self-leadership, you will just naturally fall into your outer leadership really, really well. And, these are some of the tools that I teach my clients as well. And I coach my clients and I give my clients that they've just got them and they just have to go and then practice. A lot of that
yeah.
then is the work then you have to put in with time.
Yes, no, absolutely. And actually on, I guess, a similar note, I think again, something that's very common is we often see our staff as kind of a headache and an expense. And you quite, you showed how actually they're the people that liberate you. And so how do you cross that hurdle from, which is really about empowering your staff to, you talked about it earlier on. How do you sort of get from your staff are the constant headache and nothing's ever done the right way to actually being able to say, oh, actually, your staff are the people that build your business for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Such a great question. And again, I think I learned the hard way. I don't like to use the word toxic, but I can say that I had some toxic people in my practice. I really did. I had some like nightmare moments. And you live and you learn. But there's one thing is that I just think I've just got like a structure and a protocol around my recruitment side of things. Okay. Now, also, can I just say, it is no matter how amazing that structure or whatever I think it is, people are people. You're still never going to know someone until they've been in your practice for 6 months. Okay. And at that point, if you feel that they're not right for you, you have to have the courage just to let them go, because I just think that like you said before, Alan, it's like rather than having someone there that isn't, if you really feel they're not right for you, okay, then you just have to let them go and just find a temp, just find something just to keep you ticking for a while until you find the right person, especially for some of your key leadership roles, like your practice manager, like your lead nurse, maybe some of you have TCOs, just things like that. They're so essential. um Going back to your question is, again, I always like it's lead by example. I want to show up. Um, I want to show up. I want my team to show up how I show up. Do you know what I mean? I'm showing them that I have a really great work ethic, that I work really hard. I'm a mom, I'm own a business. I always tell everyone like there's no point of you coming into my practice, there's no point of me hiring you if you can't take feedback and you don't want to grow. Two things, right? And I make them feel like this practice and the culture and everything we've created here is so precious that they're part of something amazing. And you create that. You bring that energy into the practice. And I think if principals are coming in, they're stressed and they're like reactive, and no one likes to work with people like that. Even patients are not going to like it. If they're like not, they're rude to their nurse. And I'm always just like, I always say, first of all, my practice is like my first child. Um, Kept me up at nights, constantly pooed on me, constantly had problems, always sick, always had issues. And I tell my staff about these stories and what I endured and what I went through, and they're so wowed about that, the fact that, they saw me go through all the infertility and, still go. So, when staff see you go through hurdles, they see you work hard and they still see you come in smiling and giving them a hug and like doing nice things for them. Like, just be a good human being. And people can't resist a good human being at the end
Yeah.
of the day. It takes a pretty horrible person to not like that. So I think that generally works really well. But also I'm not a pushover. Also, I know how to have those tough conversations.
Yeah.
And they respect me, and that they fear me maybe potentially as well, that, gosh, Sarika's asked for a chat. This must be something serious, including associates. So, and you need to have that sense of authority. So it's about the fine balance of, I always say that there's a fine boundary between friendliness and being someone's friend.
Yes,
And you have to have that boundary.
absolutely. Thank you. Really, 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 really informative. I think this we could carry on for a long time on this
Yeah, this is such
subject.
a huge topic.
But yeah, really wonderful evening. I think we should probably wind it up. Last chance for any other questions.
Don't feel shy, guys. Just ask what you want. It's quite late though as well.
But
Breakfast.
good. I would say I think I liked your summary of be a good human. That's a good way
Wow.
to finish the evening. So again, thank you so much, Sarika.
My absolute
Thanks
pleasure.
everyone for joining us tonight. And yeah, we have a good evening.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thank
Have a
you.
good evening. Bye.
Bye.